I'm Lopez. I'm a fourth year out of 5 at Stanford Med.
I'm Norma, and I'm a third year medical student at Stanford as well.
My name is Twee. I'm a second year at Stanford.
Why medical school? Why did you choose to be in medicine?
Yeah, I mean, you're going to get that question in the interview trail everywhere you go. So anywhere you interview, everyone's going to be asking you why medical school, why medicine. I mean, for me, it all started back in high school. I was deeply in love with the sciences. Science and math classes, that's where I was, good at. So fast forwarding to college, I majored in biology, biochemistry, and cell bio, and I just wanted to explore not just medicine, but also if I could do a PhD route, for example. So in college, I worked in a research lab. I did that route and really explored if I was going to be okay doing research for, just as a career. I also took the opportunity during my junior year of college to volunteer at the VA hospital in San Diego. And I volunteered in the emergency department, physical therapy, so I really got an understanding of the medicine world, and I enjoyed it. I loved interacting with the patients, I loved what doctors were doing and diagnosing and treating patients and getting them out of the hospital and leading healthy lives. And I was blown away. I really enjoyed the patient interaction, and that's something I was not getting in the basic sciences. I didn't want to get stuck, for example, just working in pipetting and doing repetitive steps. So I think it started in high school, and it was a gradual process, and I just started learning more about it and just delving more into medicine to finally, at the end of my college years, to applying to medical school. So it takes time, but I think, I think that's kind of like my journey into medicine, just step by step, learning more about it, and I got there.
So my interest in medicine kind of comes from my personal background and experiences. So I grew up in Mexico, and I was there until I was 18. So I grew up in this really tiny place with no clinics or medical services really around. So just growing up like that and seeing my family, my mom and my little sister were always sick, so we were always having to deal with finding somebody to take them to the closest clinic. And when you live in a town where only like 2 people in the entire town have a car, it's really frustrating, and they kind of serve as your ambulance service. So whenever somebody has an emergency, they kind of have to step in and take care of that. So part of it was my personal experience. The other part is also like the science is so fascinating to learn about the human body and how it all works and how the balance of it. And I also experienced or explored the basic science research as an undergrad, and then I did some clinical research when I graduated. I took time off. So just seeing that difference, I enjoyed much more my clinical research experience, where I was actually having interaction with patients. And even though I really liked it, I wanted to be the one to provide medical care for the patients, not necessarily just the research side of it. I'm very interested in research too, but I think that the main thing for me is providing that medical care, and I'm interested in community health and underserved communities just from my personal background.
So my path to medicine, I think it started pretty early on. When I was in elementary school, I think I always just liked helping people. I really enjoyed my science classes. I thought human biology was so incredibly cool. I had a very tight-knit family, and so I grew up just really wanting to help my family, my community, and making a difference. And then as I got to high school and even college, I really sort of developed this strong inclination towards the sciences even more, and medicine, and that just reinforced everything. So essentially, like, everything I did moving forward just reinforced my desire to sort of enter medicine, enter the health careers. And even within the health careers, you don't have to be a doctor. You can be a nurse, you can be a social worker, you can be a dietitian, and they all contribute greatly to the healthcare team. And I think for me, I specifically chose to do medicine and to be a doctor because I really was fascinated by the underlying science underneath it and the clinical reasoning and everything that goes into being a doctor and solving cases and making those decisions. And so essentially that's sort of what led me to where I am now, is just a multitude of things and research and everything that's already been discussed. I think it just reinforces you. The more you get exposed to it, the more you'll realize if, this is for me or this is not for me. So it's like a constant rechecking yourself. Am I on the right path? Am I on the right path? And sort of, it just all worked out for me.
Is it recommended or required to have the research experience prior to applying for medical school? And if it is, recommended or required, how much research experience did you have prior to applying, and what type of research experience did you engage yourself in?
Let's see. So, is it required? So I think the answer is going to be no, because it's just not required. At the end of the day, you have to do something you enjoy doing and something you want to learn more about. I think most of us did research. I, for one, wanted to really explore the PhD route. I really like biology, so I did research. I did cancer research just because I wanted to be in that field. And I realized that actually I did not want to just focus and research. Having said that though, if you decide to pursue and do a year, a quarter of research, you have to make sure it's a productive time. So I'm also, like I mentioned earlier, 4 out of 5, which means instead of a typical 4-year route at Stanford, I have the option of doing a year of research. And that's what I'm doing. So this year, I'm just doing research in a more clinical, translational research projects, not just basic science, which is what I did in my undergrad years. And I keep, thinking about it, and it's like, you have to be productive during that year. And if you don't enjoy it, it's going to be really hard for you to go into lab and do the experiments and produce something at the end of your time there. So if you do choose to do research, do a topic you're going to enjoy. It doesn't have to be basic science. It can be clinical research where you actually interact with patients, for example. Something translational where you combine basic science and the clinical aspect, or something, say, health policy, which one of my friends in my class actually took a year to do health policy stuff in DC. So I think there's, whatever you choose to do, make sure it's something you enjoy, you want to learn more about.
Yeah, so research is definitely not a requirement to apply to medical school. That being said, at schools like Stanford, there's like 90% students who have research when they get in, so that's something to consider if you're thinking about a school like Stanford. Not required, but keep in mind 90% of people do have that research experience. My research experience is a little bit different. I went to community college. And during my undergrad time there, I did summer programs. So I went to other schools because there's no research in community colleges. So I did a couple of those, and then I transferred to Davis. So I did 2 quarters of basic science research. And then, like I said, when I graduated, that's when I did a year and a half of clinical research. And also, it's something, the basic science research, I just kind of happened to learn about a program, and I applied, and I really liked it. So I decided to do a few more programs, but then the clinical research was something that I was really interested in. So after graduating, I didn't keep going with the basic science because I really wanted to experience a more direct patient contact setting.
So just to add on to what's already been said, research is definitely not required at Stanford. 90% of people actually do it. I have classmates who's never done research. And the term research is really broad. I think a lot of you don't really even understand what research is. I know I didn't, as before in high school, I was like, what is research? And it's a very broad term because it does apply. You have your basic science research when you're in a lab, you're pipetting, you're looking at specimens, doing staining and looking at these small molecules. And that can be one type of research, but another type of research could be community-based, where you're going to the community, talking to patients, taking surveys. That's also research. So it's a very, very broad term. That's number one. Number two, every school sort of looks for different things and they value different things. And so when you're applying to medical school, you do want to do your research, as in go and look at the schools and see what they value. And some schools value research more than other schools. And I know a school like Stanford obviously values research a lot. But other schools, might value community service more, or other schools might value, your, like, how well you do with classes more. And so that's why research is not a requirement, because your strengths could be elsewhere. And if you don't enjoy research, don't do it. I think you should try it, because I think it's a very intellectually stimulating thing to pursue, and you can get a lot out of it. But if it's not your thing, pursue what your thing is. And I think that sort of is the more important thing to take away is, do what you love and do it well, as opposed to doing research because it's a checkbox you need to sort of click off. If there's a question?
How did you guys find out about research opportunities?
So I guess I'll just start. So I started research when I was in undergrad. So I was an undergrad at Stanford, and I was a freshman, and people kept talking about this research because I have classmates who started doing research in like high school. I was like, what? And so I literally just like went online to the website, look at professors who were doing this research, reading up on their labs, and reading up on like the different things they were studying. And we had access to the professors' emails, and I would just email them and be like, hey, I'm a freshman here at Stanford, I'm really interested in your research, can we meet and talk about it? And I think I like sent out like 20 emails, maybe like 8 of them responded to me because they're really busy people. I didn't take that personally at all. And maybe 8 of them responded, I met with like 2 of them, and then I ended up picking one of them to sort of dedicate my time to.
I actually, before transferring, so as a community college student, I went to conferences, and that's how I learned about programs. So like today, during lunchtime, there was the exhibitor fair. There's like a bunch of schools that come to talk to you. So I would go to those conferences and ask each one of the tables if they have a summer research program. And they usually do, and they usually bring like a flyer or something for you to take. So I did that. That's how I learned about most of the programs that I did. And I also included in my application that I learned about the program at whatever conference I went to, and that really helps you because they're there to recruit students. So, so they kind of see that that's working. And then once I transferred, I got information about research programs at the Student Resource Center, I think, something like that. Or there's email going around if you sign up for with the health and biological sciences, they serve things like that at the school. So you kind of have to see if there's something at your school. Find out and get informed. If not, look at other schools. You don't have to stay in your own school.
Yeah, I mean, basically what they said, I think the first few years of college, I have some friends also that were bio majors, and some of them were getting research positions in like laboratories on campus. And at first I was like, how are they doing it? How are they, I was in the beginning very jealous of the people that were already in research labs. I was like, I'm scoring like well in my biology classes, what does it take to, join a research lab? And what we said, you kind of have to take the initiative. You have to go online. You have to go on your school's website or whatever field you're in, and look at the faculty members, see who has a lab or what research they're doing, and read up on them. I recommend that you read one of their latest papers, like one of their later publications, because that gives you something to talk about when you're meeting with them face to face. So take initiative, email them, say you're interested. I don't know, when I was in San Diego, I think I emailed like 2 of them, and both of them responded to me. And they were very different projects, but both sounded really, really cool. One was on worms, and one was on tumor suppressors. And I went on the tumor suppressor because cancer biology was the hot topic, stem cell biology, and he was doing a lot of both of that research. So that's the track I chose, but I took the initiative. I emailed him. I wrote up a paper that he published, and that's it.
What do you recommend to a person who has applied multiple times and to gain some research experience and has not gotten the opportunity to get into the summer internship program? Like they've applied once, twice, 3 years in a row, and they haven't gotten into the program, the summer internship or research. Do you guys have any recommendations?
I think the only thing would be, so for most of the programs you are required to have letters of recommendation. So if you're not getting in, I would look into that. See who's writing your letters, maybe, if it's applying to programs, maybe you can contact that particular program and ask what they're looking for. Also, like once you apply, if you don't get in, you can always contact them and ask them how you can improve your application for the next year. And that could also help you. So don't, like if somebody rejects you, don't just let it be like that. You can always contact them. And they're usually pretty good at mentoring students, especially because you're showing interest and you're showing that initiative that they were talking about. So keep trying. Sometimes it just doesn't work the first time. Sometimes you apply to 20 programs, you don't get into any of them, but then the next year you get into all of them. So it's not a for sure thing. You just have to keep trying.
If you didn't get in that year, you still have another year to work on your application, continue building that CV and gaining more experiences. So like I said, it's choose something you truly want to learn more about and continue working on that.
Sorry for your question. So the other thing is consider the programs that you're applying to. If it's like a formal program and you want to have like a project of your own and maybe get paid for it, if you're not getting those types of programs, you might want to consider volunteering at a lab to get some of that research, some of that background that can make you more qualified for the program. So also think about the programs that you're applying to. If you've never done any research and you're trying to go for like a very competitive one, you may have a disadvantage, so try to get some volunteer experience. And that was a question.
Do people still change their career opportunities within medical school?
Career options.
Like within medical school, or just decide they don't want to do medical school?
No, within medical school.
Yeah, coming in, I think most of my application was geared towards just primary care and that setting of patient care. As you gain more experience in taking classes and do your rotations where you basically work in the hospital and rotate through different specialties from internal medicine, surgery, pediatrics, you get to learn what each doctor really does. So I changed my mind maybe like 3 times. Now that I'm closer to finishing medical school, I have a really good idea of what I want to do, and it changed during medical school. Yeah.
Yeah, so do you guys know, so medical school is 4 years, and your first 2 years is just classes, where you're learning basic science, you're learning the medicine behind it, and then your second 2 years are your clinical years where you're spending 6 to 8 weeks in different specialties, and then you don't really have to make a decision on which specialty you want to train in until your 4th year when you're actually applying. And so, a lot of my classmates, including me coming in, we have a sense of what we want to do. Personally, I like pediatrics, I like neurology, maybe peds neuro, but I'm still in my preclinical year, so I haven't really gotten out there on the wards, in the hospital, on the floor, following the teams in peds or following the teams in neuro. So I can't say for sure because, who knows, I might spend 6 weeks in cardio and decide that that's that's my thing, or in surgery or something. So I really don't have to make that decision until my 4th year, and between then and now I could switch many times, and they're not holding me liable for anything.
Yeah. Basically, you have to have an open mind when you go into medical school. Sure, you have an idea of what you want to do, but when you're there, just keep an open mind to all the specialties. You might like surgery. I did. So.
Yeah, since you all were different years, I was wondering if you guys could tell me a little bit about your day-to-day, week-to-week, and then also, how about your outside relationships? They always talk about how medical school takes over your life. You're living at the hospital, you're living on school, and, I'm in a committed relationship. I'm just curious, does it really impact that aspect of your life? I know it's a really complicated, multi-step question, but...
No, that's a really important question, because I actually was talking to my friend about this the other day, how I thought as an undergrad I would come into medical school and be like, all right, I just gotta buckle down, study all the time, #1 priority, try and be a doctor.
Yeah.
Everything else falls to the wayside. And that's totally not true at all. I'm buckling down, it requires a lot of time organization and being efficient with your time if you want to do everything you want to do. So I do study a lot. I think I study more than I did as an undergrad, definitely, but I also make time for my family, whom I'm really close to in Pittsburgh, California. I make time for my friends, my undergrad friends, and my friends who are also my classmates. And so I guess sort of my day-to-day, it's definitely more scheduled. I look at my calendar and I schedule a lot more things, so there's less flexibility because I want to cram so much in at the same time. But I think first 2 years you have classes mostly, so we have class in the morning, 9 to noon, and then at Stanford at least, we have afternoon classes on Tuesdays, Thursdays. Our Wednesdays are completely free. And the nice thing about our classes, our morning classes, they're all recorded. I think some medical schools have recorded lectures, some don't, so that's something you want to probably look into. So maybe like 20% of our classmates actually go to class, and the rest of them prefer to just watch the lectures from home, just allowing them that flexibility to have meetings, do research, sleep in, because they sort of like work at night better. They're not morning learners. So there's a lot of flexibility in terms of studying. And then, I mean, Stanford's a particularly flexible school in that they do allow you to do a lot of things outside of classes. So I do a little bit of research, and that's like 10 hours a week I schedule in between my classes. There's also a lot of opportunities to teach, and you get paid for teaching, which is nice because then you take out less loans. So I teach on like Thursday afternoons. And then you have to eat. So you schedule dinners with like, your friends and your family, and that's sort of like a way to catch up, and also like you have to eat. And so it's really nice to hit 2 birds with 1 stone. And you're working so hard because you're obviously like trying to be a doctor and a good one. So it's really important to take care of yourself. And you identify what's good for you and what you need in your life. And for me, that's exercise. So I like put into my schedule, like, this is time for me to exercise. And I put that in my schedule, so later if I have free time, I'm not like watching TV or something. Although some days I do just watch TV because I need it. But making sure I take care of myself by like exercising, by seeing my family, my friends, and then that makes me happier and more efficient when I'm actually studying. And I know a lot of my classmates are in relationships. One of my classmates has a wife and a baby and 2 babies on the way. So he's all-star. I don't know how he's doing it. And then, another one of my classmates got married last December, 2 got engaged, people are growing up. So, yeah.
The other thing that I was going to add is, this depends on the school, but at Stanford we have pass, no pass for our grading system. So as long as you get a 70% on your tests, you pass the class. So it's pretty much up to you how you want to structure your study schedule and everything, and what things you value in your life. So if you want to go for the 100%, kill yourself every night and study all the time, you can do that. That's not going to be any different than somebody who studied. I mean, you still have to study really hard to get that 70%.
Yeah.
But if you have other things in your life that you value, you can make that time for that.
All right, so that's the preclinical years. So now with the clinical years, that's where, so you'll find that the transition from undergrad to medical school, the first 2 years is not that bad. It's basically a continuation of your science courses for the most part. Yes, you do learn to work with patients during the first 2 years, and they gradually teach you, how to ask questions, how to, interview a patient, how to do a physical exam the first 2 years as well. So now the transition between 2nd year and 3rd year, you're going from preclinical work to clinical work, and you're going to be in the hospital from the early morning to pretty late at night. So, I mean, each rotation, each specialty is a little bit different with their schedule. The hardest one, obviously, is going to be surgery. I got to the hospital at 4 a.m., and some days I didn't leave until 10 p.m. And that's just because you're around on patients in the morning, then you go into surgeries, and there's plenty of surgeries scheduled every day. And surgery starts at 7:30 or 8 a.m. Each day, and they can go up until 5 p.m. After 5 or 6, depends on the case, you go back to your patient, you round on them again late at night, and if you're on call, you stay an extra few hours to see if any other cases come in late at night, any emergency surgeries, or any other, if you're in medicine, patient comes in late at night, they have to do all the work. So the clinical.
But that's surgery.
That's surgery. That's surgery.
It's
So
like
I think
family medicine.
that extreme, which is surgery. So yes, the other rotations are going to be a bit milder, like 7 a.m., 6 a.m. You have to go in, and you're out by 5. So more talk, more. You can do that. It's easier on your schedule. So I mean that's rotations, and you're gonna have to work some weekends, a day or two, depending on the specialty. And each specialty, like I said, each specialty is different, but you should expect to be in the hospital most of the time. And you do have so even though surgery was painful and very long. I took it during the winter months, so a year ago, around January, February, that's when I did my surgery rotation. And I still went to Tahoe. So I took some weekends, the 1 or 2 weekends that I had off, and I just went to Tahoe. I had a season pass, so I had to use it. So there is that flexibility. You just have to find that time, and you will. I did, and I did it in surgery, and you'll definitely do it in other rotations that are easier and not flexible, but have better schedules.
Yeah, has medical school at any point gotten so difficult that you kind of felt like just throwing in the towel? And how did you get past it?
You felt like what? What was the last part?
Like giving up.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So there's not many, but there are there. I think the worst one for me was when I was studying for step 1. So
I'm going to start with that soon.
yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
So so in medical school you take two exams. They're called USMLE Step 1, Step 2, and they're your licensing exams to actually become a doctor. And the first one you take, you usually take it before you start your clinical rotations. So between your second year and your third year, that's when you take it. And it's an extremely difficult exam. Just because you're tested on 2 years of medicine, and it's very basic sciencey, and so everything you learn in those 2 years of medicine, that's your exam. So you have to learn basically all the basic sciences of, from physiology to pathophysiology, microbiology, pharmacology, everything that you learn, and it was stressful. And what makes it stressful is not just that it's going to be a hard test, but a lot of programs use that to screen applicants, or when you're applying to residency, they use step 1 as a kind of like MCAT for entry into med school. They use step 1 as a gauge of like how well you did during your preclinical years, and they use it to screen for interviews sometimes. Depending on the program and what your specialty you're going into, there's a threshold of if you did not get 230, you're not going to get interviewed at this program, for example. So that's where I guess my stress came, because as I took practice exams and I was not scoring where I wanted to score, you become depressed, you become like anxious, and you're like, I'm never going to be a surgeon. So you start getting those thoughts. But I think I just continue working. You take some deep breaths and you just continue working. Eventually, if you think about it, everyone had to do this, and you're like, well, everyone did it. I think it's possible. I can do it. Everyone else did it. And you get over it. So I think that's my biggest oh my gosh, I'm never gonna finish medical school.
Yeah, so me and Norma are really nervous right now because we're gonna start studying for this in April and we're gonna take it in May.
Yeah.
So
that's pre-step 1.
we
We're kind of having one of those moments right now.
Yeah, just before the whole storm hits, and so it's a little bit nerve-wracking.
Yeah. But I think you definitely have, at least in my case, you have a few of those moments where you feel like,
It's kind of like, why are they testing us? Because you need to be a good doctor. You're dealing with people's lives, so it makes sense. You kind of forget that when you're like, God, I wish they would just trust me when I tell them I know this stuff.
they shouldn't.
Yeah, they shouldn't, because you know, but when you're tested, you actually don't know, and you're like, oh my God, I'm glad I'm sitting in a classroom being tested as opposed to being in a hospital taking care of patients and not knowing what I'm doing. So it makes sense that you're going to be constantly tested on your ability to take care of people because you're going to be responsible for something pretty significant. You have a question?
Did all you guys make it into med school on your first round of applying? And if you didn't, what did you do to fix that? Or if you did you get into the school you wanted?
So I did get into the school that I wanted to, which is Stanford, on my first time. Although I didn't anticipate it, I think I wouldn't say my scores are particularly competitive, and so I knew coming into the whole med school application and talking to my advisors, some of my advisors were like, you should probably retake your MCAT or you should retake some of the classes, which I did agree with sometimes, but I think I just talked to a bunch of people and sort of weighing out the risks and benefits of applying and recognizing that not getting into medical school is a reality, and a lot of people go through it. And, you know, I had a lot of friends who didn't get into medical school the first time they applied, and they graduated from Stanford, you know. They're always like, oh, you graduated from Stanford, you probably will get into medical school. False. And so, you know, it is really a really like long and hard process. And for me, I was lucky because I had a lot of other things on my applications, and I had other strengths outside of my classes. And I did a lot of research, and I got involved with a lot of things that sort of helped my application. And I guess if I had to speak on like behalf of, you know, a handful of my friends who did apply and didn't get in, you know, they didn't get in, and they did what Norma mentioned, you know, call up the schools and be like, you know, what can I do to strengthen my application? You know, they talked to advisors, you know, and just got insight on like, you know, where in my application is weak. And that could be classes. You could, you know, retake some classes. That could be getting more research experience. It could also be, you know, working on your essays. Your essays are really important, you know, and you're essentially presenting yourself on paper. And you could have two people with the same exact experience who write about them very differently, who got very different insight from their experiences. So, you know, there's so many different pieces of the puzzle that you need to be able to identify, if you did get in on the first time, where can you improve and which piece needs to improve. And so you go and improve that part of it.
So I also got into my top choice the first time. Also, I was not expecting it. My scores aren't that competitive. If you look at the average for Stanford students, I'm really not there. So for me, I applied, but I was thinking that I wasn't going to get in and that I had to reapply. So I applied everywhere. I applied to 32 schools total the first time. So, a lot of schools, because I just wanted to get into a medical school. I didn't care where it was, I would go anywhere. So I applied everywhere. I did some Stanford was like my pie in the sky, you know, it was super like high reach. And I didn't think I was gonna get in, but you know, you never know. So you just have to give it a shot. And like she said, you know, if it doesn't work out, then you call the schools. And I know many people do that. Even as like they're going through the process, if you don't get an interview, you can always call them and start, you know, if you want to start planning for the next cycle. And they're very open to that. They can review your own file with you if you want.
Yeah, I mean, similarly, I got in the first time, but I think how I approached applying to medical school was I just wanted to do it once. I just wanted to apply once and so basically I wanted to be as prepared as possible. I wanted an application that was, you know, well made, my personal statement was well written, and that I had all like the pieces of it. So, you know, I think you can apply to medical school after junior year, during the junior years of college, through that spring and summer. And I took the MCAT then. And I was like, I should apply now. But then I didn't have letters of rec, I didn't have my personal statement, and I was like, no, I should wait another year, I should work on my personal statement, I should work on getting letters of rec, and really have a well-tailored application. So I think the best advice is to prepare yourself, know what the requirements are, and just have everything. Just check that you've completed everything. If you don't apply this year, you know, wait another year and apply then when everything is ready. You don't want to scramble and submit something that's not your best shot at getting into med school. So yeah, preparation is key to getting in the first time. And if you were still prepared and you still didn't get in, I think, you know, you've got great advice from Tui and Norma to call the med schools and see what's up. But yeah, that's.
To add on to that before I get to your question, so I actually took a year between my senior and my first year of medical school because I think normally if you want to go straight through, you start applying at the end of your junior year and spend your senior year doing interviews and applications. And for me, at the end of my junior year, coming into my senior, I realized that was just not going to happen because I was just overwhelmed with school. I was overcommitted, and I was just thinking there's like no way I was going to be able to wrap up a really nice package application during my senior year of college when I'm still like, you know, doing classes, trying to pass them, trying to get letters of recs. And so I decided not to apply right straight through. And then as a result of that, I just like, you know, applied for jobs after I graduated. I got this amazing, you know, year fellowship working at a nonprofit, and I loved that experience. And I applied to medical school during that time. I was working 9 to 5, which was amazing. And so it's like, you know, there's no rush, because once you get there, you're going to spend 4 years, you're going to be a doctor for the rest of your life. Like, you know, by the time you're 50, you're not going to think back, oh God, I wish I applied to medical school like 1 year earlier and got that extra year of taking care of patients. So.
And the schools really like it, before we go to your question, they really like it when you take time off and if you have an experience that really means something to you. So in my case, when I was going through interviews, that's all they asked me about. That's all they talked about, my experiences with my time off. And I took 2 years off. So, and I think we have a lot of people in our school that take time off multiple years, not just 1 or 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And they bring in new experiences and like this outside perspective, and the schools really value that.
So what were you doing for 2 years?
Clinical research.
So you had a question?
What were the MCAT scores you get when you guys applied to medical school?
So I always make it a point to not share my numbers because I think like when you share like specific numbers, it's always like, okay, that's like my benchmark I need to go for, you know. But there is an MSTAR book, I don't know, do you guys know about it? Medical School Admission Requirements book, where they sort of give you the range and the average for each individual school. And so I think that like might be a better representation of like the whole population as opposed to like the 3 of us here.
Yeah, so definitely check that book out. I think my college had it, and I looked at it to see what the range of average MCATs were, and you know that kind of gives you a perspective into what your niche schools are, and like the ones where you kind of like are competitive, and the ones that are safety, which is I think every school is competitive to get into. But so if you just take a look at that book, and it'll give you a really good idea of the range of MCAT scores out there.
I think at Stanford it ranged anywhere from like 2930 to like 40, like 344, and I have classmates on both ends of the spectrum.
Yeah.
And obviously their applications were very different from each other with different strengths and weaknesses.
Make sure you look at the range, not just the average,
Yeah.
because the average is like 38 or something for Stanford, but when you look at the range, it's pretty spread out, so that's important.
What else is title of the book?
Medical
sorry?
school admissions requirement?
Yeah, MSAR. That's the easiest way to
Like
find it.
every single med school in the United States, their numbers, what they're looking for, their values.
Yeah.
They have a lot of good information too if you're considering out-of-state schools, because they tell you how many out-of-state students they take. So like if they only take 1%, then that's probably not a school you want to apply to. Chances aren't very high.
Tuition prices.
The one thing about the MCAT and GPA, at least my experience applying to the UC schools is a lot of them use that as a screening for getting secondaries out. So when you're in the application cycle, you kind of have to meet some thresholds, and whatever the school has, just score well or do well and have a good GPA, score as best as you can in the MCAT, because at least the UC schools use that to send out their secondaries.
I think what I think about those numbers, the MCAT and your GPA, they don't necessarily help you a lot, but they can hurt you. So if you score well, that's, they'll like look at you and they'll like, you're going to be in this pile amongst like other great applicants. But if you don't score well, that, it could hurt you because they could just not look at you at all. And so you just don't want those numbers to be preventing you from getting where you want to be. But like if you score really, really well, don't expect like, oh, I scored really well, I should get to medical school, because there's obviously so much more to that.
How can you like better strengthen your application if you did come from like underprivileged background? Because I know some of the deans are like stressing like to kind of show your story.
Yeah.
But like if you didn't come from a underprivileged background, could you stand out?
So the personal statement was the hardest thing for my application. It took me a month to write that, and I edited it tons of times. And you keep thinking, oh, I don't have anything like life-changing. Like what really I didn't go to South America and save people. I didn't build houses. So that's what you think the all-stars that are getting to med school are doing. And at the end of the day, it's your insight. It's like, what's your understanding of medicine? Why do you want to go to medical school? What have you seen? Have you volunteered in the hospitals? What did you gain from that experience? If you're able to offer an insightful and meaningful personal statement, and that's your story. It doesn't have to be you grew up in poverty and all of that. Some people, that happens to some people, but I don't know, I feel like yeah, we all stress about like, my story's not that great, but you know, spend some time on it. You know, write down ideas, things that motivate you. You know, if you're like in music and you did tons of experience in music, and that's you know somehow you can you know twist that into medicine as well. Great. So I mean, you guys you all have different experiences, and you've done many great things. We're all very different, and you know, we all took one part of our lives and we you know expanded on that and why it made us who we are and why we want to do medicine. That's my take on how you can you know sell yourself or share your story.
You can pretty much incorporate anything that you can think of into medicine.
Yeah.
You can do that. And like I was telling some students earlier, when you put your application together and you look at all your experiences, all your activities, you can see a common trend. Because usually you'll be doing things that are interesting to you, and even though you may not see the relationship between some of them, if you think about them, you'll see a common trend. And so that's something that you need to highlight. And the other thing is, like, I don't think anybody or very few people think that they have such a great story that they're going to get in just because they talk about that in the personal statement. So like he was saying, it's your experience, this is what you've seen. If you haven't had any exposure to medicine or clinical setting, then you're not very likely to say anything strong about it. And in that case, that's an experience that you need to have before you apply to medical school. Like, get out there and make sure that you know kind of what you're getting yourself into by going into this field. And then, let's see what I was going to say. Oh, about the Dean's Panel, keep in mind that when they come to conferences like this, they're trying to encourage people from underserved backgrounds to apply to medical school, so they're more likely to try to reach out to them. So saying things like, oh, you know, share about your background and this and that, and giving examples of students who have really interesting stories, because they're trying to increase that kind of student population.
Yeah, so just to add on to, you know, I do have a lot of friends who didn't come from underprivileged backgrounds, who didn't face a lot of hardships, and they, you know, got into college at Stanford, and then, you know, the ones that got into Stanford then, you know, they didn't come from underprivileged backgrounds. They came from a wide array of backgrounds, and I think sort of your story, like we've talked about already, like it's your story, it's your experiences, and what you got out of your experiences. Why are you the way you are? Like, why do you think the way you think? And so that's essentially what you're talking about. And for some people, you know, they are the way they are because they grew up in an underprivileged background. That's what shaped who they are. But for the people who didn't grow up in that background, you know, there must be other experiences that shape who you are and shape why you think the way you think. And I think that's what med schools are particularly interested in seeing. It's like, you know, where did who you are come from and what experiences impact that? And that does not necessarily have to be that you, like, struggled through something or, like, you know, had some amazing story to tell.
What did you guys use to study for the MCAT? And what was like the hardest question you got in your interview process?
Okay, so I'm not a very good test taker. The MCAT was a very, very dark time for me. And everyone's different. I talked to a bunch of my friends who took the MCAT before I did, and you know, some of them took classes because they needed that schedule. Some of them just did self-studying, used Kaplan or Princeton Review, exam crackers, and some of them, you know, literally took 3 months, did not do anything at all, and just studied full time. And some of them, you know, did research and then studied on the side and did well. And for me, I chose to do research, you know, 40 hours a week, and then do study on top of that. In retrospect, I don't recommend that, especially since I wasn't a very good test taker and I sort of like pushed my limits with that. And so that was really taxing, and if I could go back, I would not do that. I know myself now that, like, you know, if I'm studying for a standardized exam, I really need to give it 100%. And even though my friend, you know, could do like 60 hours a week of work and then go home and study, that's her, and for me, that's like not working for me. So I would, you know yourself best and you know how you do best. So when I was studying, though, I used Kaplan and exam crackers as my sort of guides, and you know, I do 8 to 6 work, and then sort of 6 to midnight studying for I think like 8 to 10 weeks, and then I took the exam. And what was your second question?
What was like your hardest interview question?
Oh, the hardest interview question. So I, for some reason, only got MMI interviews. So I did, my first interview ever was an MMI at Stanford, and then I also got MMI at OHSU and UC Davis. But are you guys familiar with the MMI process? So you have your just sort of in a nutshell, your standard interview where you meet with one person, talk to them for an hour or two, and that's your interview. And so now some schools are moving towards what they call multiple mini interviews. And so they're a series of 10-minute interviews. And the idea behind this is that you reduce bias. So if you think you're interviewing with one person, that one person, could be having a bad day, could be having a good day, could connect with you on one topic, and then that sort of determines your entire interview. Whereas for multiple mini interviews, it's 10 rooms, and there's a scenario at the door before you enter a room. You read it, think about it for 2 minutes, you enter a room, and you sit down and talk to the interviewee for 8 minutes about this topic and your thoughts on the topic. And essentially, the topics range from moral reasoning to critical reasoning to ethics. And the idea is just to get a very broad and diverse perspective on your mindset and how you operate on an ethical or critical reasoning. And so that was sort of my only interview experience.